welcome to this week's video. Now in this week's video I want to discuss the subject of getting a good driven sound at a reasonable level, a reasonable gigging level. Now I'm going to show you a little clip from one of my last gigs, and I played this to people. They think it's a good tone and it sounds like an amp really being driven hard, but it's not. In fact, I've been asked to turn up my guitar on stage several times recently, which never used to happen, but I'll go into that in more detail in a little while. So first let me show this video and show you this guitar sound that I'm quite pleased with. Little funky, makes me wanna shuffle my feet. Now I have some viewers on this channel who they say, I enjoyed your video but it all got a bit technical for me. So for those people I'm going to explain in non-technical terms what this video is about. Now this is a little meme that I've seen on the internet, and it's basically, in the olden days, to get your guitar loud enough on stage you had to buy bigger and bigger amplifiers, but completely the opposite thing is now the case, where you have to buy a smaller amplifier and then the amplifier has a microphone in front of it and it gets put out the PA speakers out the front, so it means that the volume on the stage is much quieter. Now the reason for this change mainly is that PAs have improved. So let me show you this. This was a clip from 1970, Free, one of my favourite bands, one of my favourite guitarists, Paul Kossoff, playing at the Isle of Wight Festival. And as you can look, I'll just show you this very brief clip. You can see he's got a guitar cable that splits into two and goes into two amplifiers. And he's got two massive 100-watt amplifiers. And you can hear that the guitar is driving the amps, which means they're probably turned up to about 7 or something. And that would be absolutely deafening. And I think I can see there's a microphone on the cabinets, but really I think he's trying to play to tens of thousands of people just with those amplifiers. And if you're interested in this kind of guitar nerdy content, I'm putting on a new show where I should be talking about things like this and playing lots of different genres of guitar with different guitars and different gear and stuff. And here's the poster. It's on the 23rd of July, so if you live in the south of England, come along. I'll put a link up. So when people like Leo Fender and then after that Jim Marshall started making guitar amplifiers back in the 50s, their goal was to try and make them as clean as possible and not to distort. And then people started distorting them on purpose because they liked the sound of it. And now the goal is to try and get that nice driven distorted sound that you get from an amplifier. That's the best way of getting it, just using the amplifier distortion to try and get that sound. But the problem being, unless you're playing in front of tens of thousands of people at the Isle of Wight, amplifiers like that are just too loud these days. And you also don't need them because nowadays, and I even do this myself if I'm playing in pubs, I put a microphone in front of my amp into the mixing desk, and then I use in-ear monitors, so it doesn't really matter how loud the amplifier is on stage because I can get a mix exactly how I want it to sound. I can have the drums, the bass, my vocals, everything in my ears at exactly the right balance. It doesn't really matter what the sound is like on the stage. I'm just going to butt in here and just mention that I've got a library of video guitar lessons online. Beginning country guitar one, the newest one I've put up there is all about doing left hand damping, but I've got lots of other solos. I've got show you how to play the end solo from Sultans of Swing, a solo from Hotel California. I've got some Nile Rodgers funk stuff, various other stuff. There's some monthly subscriptions or some of the lessons you can buy separately, so go and check them out. They're on my website, iamtjwalker.com, and at the top of the page there's a little tab that says guitar lessons. So the problem being, when you're playing in different size venues, so say a small pub, you'll need a very small amplifier that you can play really quite turned up quite loud for its size, so it distorts. Then if you're playing a bigger venue, you need a bigger amplifier, so it would mean you'd have to have a whole range of different amplifiers, which is why these days people use overdrive pedals to try and get that sound. And the difficulty is, is overdrive pedals can sometimes not sound very good. They can sound a bit fizzy. So I'm going to show you how I got that sound that I showed at the beginning of the video using overdrive pedals on an amplifier that wasn't really very driven. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my pedal board out, the one I use on gigs, and I'm going to plug it into the amp that I think I used on that gig. It doesn't matter which amp I use really, because the amp is kind of clean, and show you how I get that nice driven sound that sounds a bit like an amp being driven, but not having to play at ridiculous volumes. This is the amp I used, and these are roughly the settings. So I've got the volume set there. I normally boost the treble a bit and bring the mid and bass down a little bit, reverb to taste. And the drive about the same as the volume. That's kind of, I'm still not totally clear, but that will make it drive a bit more. So you whack that right up and the volume down, you're going to get a bit more amp drive. But I just have them set like that. And I've got it set on 7 watts. So it's not that loud. I'm going to use my phone camera to show you the different sounds with the pedals, as it seems to handle changes in volume better than my shotgun mic on my big camera. But this is the amp, car, Viceroy. So I'm using my Les Paul as I was on the clip earlier, and just to give you an idea of how loud it actually is, this is what the amp sounds like clean with the Les Paul, with the volumes on full on the guitar, and you can hear how loud my voice is. And this is how loud the amp is. You can almost hear me talking over the top, so it's not actually that loud when you've got drums going. So that's what the amp sounds like clean. But I always have this on, the EP booster, which does give you a boost in volume. Gives you a boosting kind of harmonic distortion. So I'll always have that on, and what I tend to do is trim when I normally do the first set on the Strat, and I might have this volume up a bit more on the Strat, and then when I get the Les Paul I'll drop it down a little bit, so you're still getting the benefit of the kind of harmonic distortion, harmonic interest, and it helps to trim the volume. Otherwise I have to do it on the amp and stuff, which I don't particularly want to do. So that's the sound of it just with the EP booster. She's starting to get a little bit of drive already. And then what I do, I use a combination of these two. So this is a Keeley modified blues driver, and it does vary how I have it set. I don't seem to be able to sort of set and forget for different gigs. I have to adjust it for each gig. But this is roughly how I'll have it. Sometimes I put the gain down a bit. But this to me can sound a bit fizzy on its own. So if I, for example, that sounds all thin and fizzy, so you can't have too much gain. You need to whack the level up. But I very rarely use that on its own. So that's what that one sounds like on its own. So I have the gain, what am I talking about, the tone just above halfway, and it's got this bass boost. These pedals look disgustingly dirty when I get them out in the daytime. I can never notice it on the gig, but it just gets gigged all the time, and I very rarely clean it, which I probably should. Anyway, the Archer, the clone, it's got the output just over a quarter, drive just over a quarter, and the treble just boosted slightly. So that's without, and then with. And actually that, I quite like the sound of that on its own, but it doesn't always give me quite enough drive. If you watch my Joe Bonamassa video, see me moaning about him having too much gain. And it is a fine balancing act between having not enough, so the notes are too distinct, the transients are too hard, so it makes it difficult to play fast and fluently, but having too much gain, so you lose the kind of sound of the guitar and the definition. So it's a balancing act. But that's why I find out if I use these two together, you kind of get the best of both worlds. So you get that nice fat drive from that, and that this softens the transient, or the transient being that, you know, when you pick the note. So instead of it being donk, it's kind of beam, 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 and it makes it easier to do, you know. Well, I'll show you. So put them both on. That sounds more gainy in here than it does on a gig generally, but that's the sound I'm using. which actually sounds quite loud in here. It's hurting my ear. Well, there we go. That's how I get that sound. So basically using a combination of these 3 pedals, but without too much gain. I mean, sometimes I'll even turn the gain down further on that one. But as you can see, if you turn these up on their own, not that one so much, but this one, it can sound really fizzy and like an overdrive pedal. But when you use them all in combination, it sounds like you're driving an amp rather than an overdrive pedal. Well, there we go. I hope that all made sense. I'm going to leave you with another track of me playing my Strat. Now, this isn't quite as driven because as I said previously, I tend to use the trim to trim the amount of gain I've got using that EP booster, but the Strat is a lower output guitar, and quite often I want a lower gain sound. So I'll show you this clip to leave you on this video. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment. I bring out new videos 7 PM UK time every Friday, so I hope to see you next week.
Oh yes, and this is all I've got to show. It's come and gone. Oh, I was wrong.